Hey BookTube, Chelsea the Reading Out Loud to do something a little different. I think I'm going to try and switch to doing like a two-part monthly wrap-up and doing one part about halfway through the month and the other part at the end of the month. Yes, I still have a cold. Yes, I apologize. I know it's not necessarily the most attractive thing in the world, but life waits for nothing and for no one. So we're going to move right along ahead. This is the kind of wrap up for the first 2 weeks in January of 2016. I'm also, since I didn't do an official January TBR, I am going to talk about some of the things I'm hoping to read later in the month and continue on with in the month. But yeah, let's talk about the stuff I've already read. First up on the pile is Nailbiter Volume 3. I love this series. I did not love this volume. This is one of those volumes that sometimes I feel like happens in a graphic novel series where you just, like, they need to bridge kind of the gap. Like they have, I'm assuming in Volume 4 there are going to be some really big things that happen. And in Volume 2 we left off on kind of a pretty big cliffhanger. But Volume 3 is just kind of filling the gap in between those two. And so nothing really happens. You don't necessarily learn anything new. It's just kind of an introduction of this new character, this new bad guy. Again, ramping up towards what I'm assuming is going to be a really big kind of plot point or confrontation in Volume 4. But yeah, I think I ended up giving this one like 2 stars on Goodreads, either 2 or 3. So I did not particularly love it very much. If you've never heard me talk about Nailbiter before, here is some of the like art style. It is a story about a town called Buckaroo, Oregon. I think it's Oregon. Yeah, Buckaroo, Oregon. That's had some like 20 serial killers come out of it in the last 20 years, and everybody kind of wants to know why Buckaroo, like what is it about this town that keeps breeding these serial killers. So a cop is going to investigate, and he kind of teams up with one of the serial killers who was released. And yeah, it's lots of twists and turns. If horror is not your thing, I would not recommend it, but I actually really, really love this series. And even though I did not like Volume 3, I would still highly recommend picking up Volume 1 and 2. Next up, we have another book that okay, you guys, brace yourself. I did not care for this book. I am probably like the only person in the world who did not care for this book, but I did not. And that is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. This is an old copy, so at the time it had just won the Prince Award. If you see other more recent copies of this book, you will see like it's won like the Stonewall Award and the LGBTQ Teen Fiction Award. And, like this whole like side panel is just filled with award stickers. So it is a very, very highly lauded book. My problem is that I found the main character, Ari, to be incredibly annoying. This book is set in the 80s, and it's kind of about two boys, Aristotle and Dante, obviously, as they work through growing up. They work through their sexuality. They work through their ethnicity. One of the parts of this book that I did really, really enjoy was kind of the continued conversation on what it means to be a real Mexican and what it means to be a real representation of your heritage, and whether or not there are certain degrees of realness. Like, if you have that culture but don't embrace it, like where do you fall on that spectrum? And I found that really, really interesting. I will also give this book major props for the parents involved. This book has probably the best set of parents and parental units that I've read in young adult fiction probably ever. I liked the parents in this book more than I liked Aristotle and Dante. There's a lot to their story in there to dig into that I really enjoyed, and I was kind of disappointed sometimes when we had to go back to talking about Ari, and couldn't really kind of dig into the story that his parents had going on. In terms of why I find Ari so annoying, part of it has to do with the end of the book that I don't want to spoil, but he spends a lot of the book being angry and being aloof and reclusive, but then he feels it necessary to remind you all the time that, like, he said so many times in this book, like, I'm angry. I'm just going to disappoint you. I'm, nobody knows me. I'm unknowable. And I just kind of want to be like, yeah, dude, that's your fault. Um, you don't have to be that way. It's not like a writ of the world that you have to be that way. I listened to it on audiobook, and I don't know if maybe that made it worse. I think sometimes for me, I wouldn't notice things in print, but hearing them spoken out loud, the repetition starts to get to me. That's something I'm noticing more with audiobooks. So I was not a huge fan. I only gave this one 3 stars. I will link my Goodreads review down below. I go into a little bit more detail, but yeah. In the kind of, not battle, because I'm not trying to make this a comparison thing, but in the, in terms of the what you're reading books that I've read so far, I did not enjoy this one nearly as much as I enjoyed Dumplin. Which brings us to Dumplin by Julia Murphy. As you guys know, I absolutely adore Dumplin. I will link my review to it in a card and down below and all that good stuff. I enjoyed this one so much more than I loved Aristotle and Dante. This one definitely, in terms of like the parents and stuff, kind of toes the YA line of like semi aloof, like not really involved, kind of emotionally damaging mother. But I just thought that the characters and the humor and the story of this one was so much like better done and more well crafted. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed Dumplin by Julie Murphy. And then there were a couple other things that I finished up that count, but like kind of, I don't know. I don't know how I feel, but like it's hard for me to count Harry Potter in like books read because I've read them so many times, but I did reread Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This is my paperback copy. I still don't have any of my books from my parents' house. I left them there when I went to college because I was like, I am not taking these to a dorm room with me. And I've been out of college for like 4 years and I live in my own house and I'm married and grown up. So I should probably go get my Harry Potter books. But yeah, I don't have them. So this is the paperback from the library. Finished Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I don't actually know if it's going to remain my favorite in the series. I still really, really, really enjoyed it, but it felt like more of a slog this time than it has in the past. And I don't know if that's me. I don't know if maybe I was just in kind of a weirder mood than I usually am. But so far in this reread, the third book is standing out as being my absolute favorite. So yeah. And then I also finished an audiobook. I finished Gumption by Nick Offerman. I forget the subtitle, but I'll try and put the cover up here. This is basically just kind of him profiling 21 different Americans who he believes possess gumption as a trait, and kind of how they use their gumption and their humor and their drive and their dedication to do different things in the world and affect different things. He talks about people like Yoko Ono and Carol Burnett. He talks about Michael Pollan. He talks about some of the founding fathers. It wasn't the greatest spread in terms of like male versus female, but I wasn't entirely surprised by that. Most books aren't. He did better than I think most people probably would have, but that still wasn't exactly like a 50-50 split. And I enjoyed this one way more than I enjoyed his first one, actually. My thing with Nick Offerman is I love his humor. I love the way that he speaks. He's very intelligent. I love the way he speaks about his wife. I just don't care about woodworking. And so much of his first book is about his adventures in woodworking that I just was like, okay, I'm going to listen because you're Nick Offerman and I love you, but this is actually really boring to me. So there was not nearly as much of that. I skipped the chapter in Gumption that was all about a woodworker. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed it and would recommend it if you're looking for a fun celebrity read audiobook that's not really like a memoir. Like obviously he shares details about his life and stories about his life and why he picked the people he picked, but it is like in no way a memoir. So I would highly recommend it. I gave it, I think 4 stars on Goodreads. I'm pretty sure. And that about wraps up what I've read in this first half of the month. Carrying on in the second half of the month, I am listening to a new audiobook. I am listening to the audiobook of Going Clear. What is it? Like Scientology, Hollywood, and the fear of something. I don't remember what the subtitle is, but again, I will put the cover up. I have watched the documentary of this movie like 6 times because I love it. And we've talked in a previous video not too long ago about my love for Scientology, and a reader actually recommended the book, or a viewer actually recommended the book, and I realized that although I've seen the movie, I've never read the book, and obviously the book is probably going to go into more detail, so I decided to pick that up on an audiobook, and I'm really enjoying it. And excuse me. In addition to that, I'm planning on starting a couple of physical things. I am planning on finally reading The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson, so that I can read Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson, so that I can read Bands of Mourning when it comes out at the end of January. Basically, I need to get caught up on all of the Wax and Wayne follow-up to the Mistborn trilogy, because I'm awful and haven't yet. But usually, like, steampunky kind of westerns aren't necessarily my thing, but I've heard good stuff about this one, so I'm willing to go with it. I've heard it described as kind of like the Gunslinger meets Mistborn or Cosmere. And I hated the Gunslinger, but I love Cosmere. So hopefully combining the two will at least result in kind of like a middle ground. And then lastly, I am planning on reading The Girl Who Slept with God by Val Brelinski. This is one of the books that I carried over from my 2015 checkouts list. I'm planning on doing a buddy read with Brittany from Under the Radar Books. I'm hoping that still happens. She's going through some kind of tough things at the moment, so I'm not quite sure if she's going to be up for doing the buddy read. I hope she is, but one way or the other, I am still planning on getting through this by the end of January. And lastly, I have also started a new ebook. I am reading The Raven Boys, the first book in the Raven Boys cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. I've never read these books. I don't know where I've been, you guys. I have no excuses. But I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm through the first couple of chapters, and yeah, it's really, really good so far. I'm really enjoying it, and I've heard really good things from everybody who's read it. So I'm hoping to add that to my like trilogies finished in 2016 list. That's all I got, guys. That's all I have for you right now. If you've read any of these, let me know down below. If you have any other recommendations, make sure to fill me in. And as always, you can like, subscribe, and catch me all around the internet. All right, guys.